Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, an inspired conversation space between Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner on the journey of motherhood through the common thread of parenting, relationship, and sexuality as a path to consciousness.
We keep our conversations honest, our experiences real, and our philosophies exploratory. We believe that in order to raise incredible humans, we first have to raise ourselves. We know that in order to rock the family, you've got to nourish the mother. If you are here, you care about paving a path of conscious and intentional motherhood, connected with yourself and your gifts, and also illuminating your children in theirs so we may raise more whole humans who can impact this world in a more humane way.
If you desire to integrate your learnings practically and supportively, head on over to bridgetwood.life or julietenner.love to go deeper. And for all live-streamed, pre-release podcasts and all our free content, head over to our free Facebook group, Nourishing the Mother with Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner. We are Julie Tenner and Bridget Wood, and we are so grateful you're here.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner, and today's podcast is Navigating a COVID Christmas, which we all are, and it's been a super different year for everybody, and I imagine a super different Christmas as we all navigate family tensions, whether family can travel, whether we can travel, whether we want to, whether they want to, what we're doing with people who are feeling most vulnerable and afraid, how we're navigating the whole concept of a COVID Christmas, and just really making sure that we have ourselves first and foremost. So that's where we'd like to take the conversation in this podcast.
Yeah, and just like hold yourself with as much gentleness and grace as we converse on this, because I don't doubt that there's, I don't think there's a single person that's not, grappling with certain feelings that a COVID Christmas brings.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I don't think you can get a more divisive topic than vaccination.
Yeah, absolutely.
Between couples, between families, like I just see it, that one topic being so volatile that it can create enormous fractures and therefore change the way that we're experiencing love and Christmas.
And also to really see how much ideology can get in the way of our humanity as well. So I really hope that this conversation opens that up a little for you and opens up some flexibility and some ability to take up the space of seeing things in another person's shoes.
Yeah, being able to hold both perspectives. Yeah. That's what I deeply value too, is choose what you choose. That's cool. But be able to hold both. We actually need a world that can hold both in order for there to be clear choice. Because if you don't hold both, how are you choosing?
Yeah, well, but you don't really have choice if there's only, if you can
one choice.
If you can only occupy one space, there is no choice.
Yeah, totally. But that gets really hard when we might pull in old childhood wounds around not being seen, being the black sheep, not being valued, another sibling being chosen over us, like all of these old wounds we can start to see come up around a new topic.
Yeah. And how perfectly does, the issue of vaccination or being able to travel or not being able to travel plug into what already might be clear family patterns about the roles people occupy within the family. And if you're already the black sheep, then this is probably going to make you more of a black sheep. And you might be reined in. And how are you? Can you be okay with that? And can you, allow the diversity of opinions and values and experience to exist without needing to desire to change someone else? Or sit in this place of reaction and self-protection? Like, how can you be boundaried but still love the difference?
How have you navigated that? How have you done that?
Look, it is a real practice for me. I have, come to the choice of being vaccinated, and my family opinions had a lot to do with that, and shaped that decision making for me. Ultimately, it was a recognition that, you know, my mother was really struggling with my choice, and that there's some vulnerability in my family, like in extended family, who were going to be present, who would have likely felt vulnerable around me, and the perception that I could be putting them at risk. And so it was a wrestle for me, because I had to, you know, look at a really diverse set of beliefs and science and facts, and also throw a lot of that out to then look at the value I have on relationship and seeing somebody else's perspective, and then leaning into trust that I can do this, that this is ultimately going to be a service to my family and to me, and that I can expand into this choice even when I have reservations and fears and beliefs that are, you know, maybe opposite to what I'm choosing, for a bigger picture that I see and value, which is my family relationships. So that took a lot of wrestling for me, and it took a lot of hard conversations, but ultimately I feel like it's a really embodied decision for me. But I also hold with a little bit of contempt the politicization of a health crisis, and how it's being very pointedly used to divide families, and, you know, will be causing irrevocable damage in some families. And that's what I feel angry about. And I feel, you know, that kind of thing naturally creates, that kind of pushing for me naturally creates in me like a fuck you, I'm not even going to do it. But I also know that that's not actually helpful in moving me toward healing or toward where I want to be. And so it's like that wrestle that I have to make internally, recognizing that, and then figuring out, well, within the limitations that we're living in, particularly in Melbourne, where we have probably the most strictest laws in the world, I think, right now around this, is to find a way to have freedom within the constraints that we're living in, and to find heart in it all, even when I feel like there are some pretty heartless tactics being used, and social engineering being clearly harnessed as a way to, you know, descend people into this emotionality and intense guilt tripping and coercion that, you know, is really dictating a lot of behaviors at the moment. So that's kind of where I am with it. And I can feel like it's the right decision for me. But I also really hold with a lot of respect those who are unable to make that decision or don't want to make that decision. And also those who don't understand why it's so hard for someone to make a decision, because there's also those people who are like, no big deal, just get it, it's fine. And then there's others who are, you know, have really big problems with it and have quit their jobs and have, you know, been ostracized from their families, and for them that's their truth. And I really hope that we can all spend a little bit of time arresting our own judgment to understand how somebody may come to the view that they have, and it not necessarily be from them being radicalized or be because they're just a sheep, but instead be because of their lived experience and their lens and their knowledge and their, you know, truth, their soul's journey as well, that takes them to where they are right now. I hold reverence for it all.
Gosh, that was so well said. I just really want to say that was really beautiful. So how do you hold yourself in all of those degrees of tension as you navigate towards sharing a literal room with potentially all of those representations?
Yeah, that's big, right? Well, I think it's first of all noticing what you're likely to take in or what you're likely to perceive people are judging you for. Because whenever we perceive somebody else judging us, it's just us judging ourselves, and they shine a light on where our self-judgment is right now. So to know where you're doing that already, you can learn that quickly when you think all these people out there are talking about you, or that person's saying that thing, or this person's going to judge that about me. Where are you doing that? And who are you putting in those positions around you? And ask yourself, is it really them, or is it me afraid of their judgment because I'm already judging myself? And what do I need to do or shift within me to be more accepting of the choices I've made, who I've decided that I am right now? What's meaningful for me? What can I do right now to be in greater appreciation of how I've arrived here? And if I am deep in judgment, then how is that a feedback trying to get me into a different choice or action? Because sometimes that outer judgment comes up as a way for us to shift gears, you know, to be the thing that pushes us where we're wanting to go but haven't given ourselves permission to yet.
Yeah, gosh, so much. And with let's just navigate the conversation to creating a Christmas, because it's often, what are you going to bring? What do you want to do? How are we going to do it? What would you say to people who are navigating how we're pulling together family to create a cohesive, collective experience?
That's an interesting one, because if you're the one who's pulling people together, you're likely also the one who's going to be sensitive to different people's needs, to potentially the vulnerabilities, as well as, like, you know, the maybe polarizations that are going to be at play. And so I think it's helpful to, you know, consider preempting those, maybe, if you wanted to, like by opening up conversation with those who maybe are feeling vulnerable, if they've got any requirements, like, you know, do they want a bit more space from the rest of the group at the table, or, like, you know, is there anything that they're feeling particularly anxious about coming into Christmas?
Do they want to, I loved, you and I were talking earlier and you were saying, even just asking, do you want to be hugged, or does that feel too confrontational right now?
Yeah. And, you know, considering for those of you who perhaps aren't vaccinated and you're worried about these conversations, to lean into how can we feel into that person's experience without taking it as an attack as well, because it can very viscerally feel like an attack, because that's also the way the media is kind of spinning it as well. So even though it's a person-to-person conversation or inquiry, that plugs into the broader media rhetoric that then can throw our body into fight or flight, because we're aware of that out there. So how do we come back into this dynamic with this person before we fling into fight or flight, because we make it mean everything that's already out there saying that I'm this, right? That I'm this irresponsible person, or whatever the general belief is.
Yeah.
And I really want to acknowledge that's really hard to do as well. And to try still to feel into a little bit, like, you know, you and I talked about this, you know, a year and a half ago about masks, when, you know, we didn't really feel like there was a lot of science around wearing them outside when you're not really around people. But we've really both felt that for the older person who's been sitting in front of the TV or reading the newspaper daily and they're terrified, I am wearing this mask for that person who I might come into closer contact with, and for whom my mask doesn't really affect me, but it affects that person's sense of safety. How is my choice here and to entering this environment potentially affecting that person's sense of safety? You know, whether they are immunocompromised, or, you know, or whatever it might be that might put them in a vulnerable place. How can I kind of, you know, reach out with the olive branch and recognize how I could make that a little bit more comfortable for them? And I'm not saying that necessarily means that you need to not go or go get vaccinated or whatever. I'm not saying any of that, but simply just spend a little bit of time feeling into how they might feel, because they're not seeing things with the lens that you're seeing things with. And so how can you spend some time seeing it from their perspective and then adjusting how perhaps you enter that space as a result?
It's really hard work to do, though, isn't it?
Yeah. And so this is also why everybody's going, well, fuck this Christmas. Like,
yeah, let's exit it instead.
Let's exit. right? Because it is hard. It's socially awkward potentially for some.
Yeah, it totally is. And it really, what you're asking or what we're suggesting you do there really has involved in it managing your own emotional state, projections, past wounds, at the same time as managing fear, which is hugely present, particularly if you're consuming any media.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. And you know, we've got on top of this, like the awkwardness of like the fact that at any point any of us could test COVID positive and go into self-isolation
and miss Christmas.
And miss Christmas. And so then there's that dance of like, what's my responsibility to those I've been in contact with, and like how far do I expect them to go? And like, so there is just this real like, you don't know who you want to talk to, or you know what people's boundaries are. Because there is this undercurrent of fear. There's fear of getting the virus and getting really sick. And there's fear of, you know, getting the vaccine and being injured, or fear of getting in trouble for the government from taking a wrong step. Like it's tricky. It's, you know, uncharted territory. And in that, there's uncertainty. And so I think we need to acknowledge like that can be hard to be in that space. And therefore, what do we need to be able to navigate it?
Totally.
Just a brief pause of this week's podcast to let you know that if you would love to connect more deeply with me and conscious parenting, then please jump into Reimagining Motherhood community. You can find out more about that at bridgetwood.life.
And if you'd love to dive a little bit deeper with me, Honey Club is your place for femme relationship and embodiment practice. And you can find out more at julietenner.love. What do you need to be able to navigate that?
A lot of what we talked about last week, which was centering onto my own values. And so a couple of those things that, you know, that were weaved in was connection. So connecting to myself and my values, and then also acceptance. How can I accept that other person's reality without needing to change it or challenge it?
Wow.
Right?
Dharma path. Yeah. Acceptance. Yeah.
I mean, like, super hard, but that's the road to freedom.
Yeah, it is. Thanks, Buddha.
I'm not saying it's easy.
No, I'm not saying you are either, but I'm just like, yeah, totally right. I mean, it's entire philosophical and spiritual underpinning on that one sentence.
Yeah. Right. And then also maybe, I mean, who knows what role each soul has to play in all of this? Like, the vaccine plays a great role right now. And then so do the people who are resisting it. Yeah. Because we need it. We need it all. Everything requires two sides, and every war had its pacifists. You know, it had its patriots. It had every part to be played, and don't think for a second that your part is not worthy, even if there's people who'll tell you it's not. Right? Yeah. You're worthy. Your truth is worthy. But I would also say, as you and I have said before on this topic, read widely. Like, consider that, you know, are you feeding one particular narrative? And I say that to the person who reads mainstream media and the person who reads alternative media. Yeah. Anyone is dangerous. We need both. You need both. And so when you find yourself going too far, like super pro, and you can't understand somebody who wouldn't take the vaccine, go and spend some time reading some of the journals that they've read and reading some of the uncertainty from scientists that they've read. Yeah. And then go, oh, maybe I could see how they might be resistant. And then if you're the person who's read all of those journals or followed all those Instagram accounts, then look at SBS World News. Or I really love, actually, what helped me was FLCC, the COVID network. It's a bunch of doctors treating COVID on the front lines, and it's a really good resource for treating it, and kind of alternative in that they use ivermectin, but they talk about the role vaccination plays, and that was really helpful for me. So I think it's like where you read typically one side, go and challenge yourself beyond your own cognitive dissonance to read the other side. Yeah, definitely. And accept that there's players on every which way you look at it. Like it's politicized now. Finding the truth, you know, the lies can do laps the world over before the truth really gets heard.
Mm.
How will we ever really know? So what are your values? What's most important to you? When all this is over, how do you want to have said that you showed up? And follow that.
It's such profoundly beautiful advice.
Thanks. Do you want to be right, or do you want to be loved and love?
Mm.
You know?
Mm.
So those are my thoughts on the COVID Christmas.
I think the last thing that I really wanted to just touch on was grief.
Yeah.
Was that for many of us, even if we feel a sense of embodiment or righteous in the choice that we're making to be with or not be with our family, that there may be grief present there for us at the same time, or in place of.
Yeah.
And my invitation to you would be to be with the grief before it spins into repressed grief, becomes resentment.
Yeah. To actually feel that and like don't
be with the grief.
Push it down.
Yeah.
Because then when you push it down and don't address it, it becomes resentment.
Yeah. Be with the grief.
Which colors the relationships.
Doesn't it? Yeah. And literally can be life altering versus this one moment in time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So be with the grief of what it's not, and be with the grief of what it is.
Yeah.
And be with the grief of not being able to do what you want, how you want to, not being able to see family or to travel to family, or whatever your version of grief is. I think in a time and a season of festivity, we must always hold a polarity, or else we become unstabilized and we come crashing at the other side of that day.
Yeah, it's true.
So to avoid a big plummet, stabilize yourself by having space for both and be with your grief. And if that feels hard, then I'm just asking you to contemplate, if I don't create the space to be with this, it can be more destructive when it turns into resentment that fires out.
Yeah. That's a beautiful invitation.
So I just,
Can you share just briefly like what it would look like for you to be with your grief?
What it looks like to be with my grief is to, first off, not make it mean anything. So not make it mean I'm sad, I'm depressed, I'm fucked up, this is fucked up, whatever. Like just removing all attachments. It doesn't mean this is shit, what's going to happen is shit. It's just, this is hard and this is what I'm grieving and need to have seen and let go. I'm sad about this. And it is okay to be sad about these things. And it's okay to move that energy through. It doesn't have to mean anything. It doesn't have to mean you're ungrateful or you're not going to have a great time or that it's not exactly as it needs to be. It doesn't have to mean anything. It's just an energy that you don't want stuck.
Yeah, I love the way, like just actually like, surrendering the need to judge or label it or kind of give it meaning and instead allow it to move through you.
Yeah. And I always think grief is one of the trickiest emotions to be with because it's often the one that I think we feel we'll drown in, like somehow we'll be lost in forever, or that will consume us or the people around us that we love.
Yeah.
And what I've come to know about grief is that it actually is just a finite pool. And every time we spend a little time with it, there's a little bit less there until one day, we think about that thing or that person, or we say that thing or that name, and we don't have the same response that we used to. We kind of come into this place of like, yeah, I see you. That was there. So grief is hard. We will always think we're consumed by it. And I think because of the intensity of its nature, we often try to avoid it. Which is why I'm saying all it needs is a container. All it needs is a structure.
Yeah.
All it needs is, I'm feeling sad today. All right, so I just need extra nourishment and extra gentleness, and I'm going to be with my sadness tonight. I'm going to let those tears come out. I'm going to share my experience and have it seen by a practitioner, my friend, my partner, whatever it is who holds my space. I'm going to focus on moving my body rather than having it become still and kind of locked up. And I'm going to journal. Maybe for you, it's journaling, like really pouring your heart and soul out. Maybe for you, it's moving and really moving for and with your grief. I'm just giving you the offering of, I recognize in times of intensity, it's often grief that gets missed, and it's the thing that will send you crashing. And it's the one that will create the greatest destruction in relationship. So I think greater destruction long-term than which side of the fence you sit on.
Yeah.
This year.
Yeah, I love that. That's really poignant. Thank you. So if you would love to move through this time of year with some intention, we do invite you to hop on our website, nourishingyourmother.com.au, and sign up for our free Kids Kindness Advent. And in that, you can pick and choose what feels good for you, knowing that you may need to go a little bit more gentle on your nervous system this time of year. But it can be a really great way to connect to more connection and greater humanitarian spirit with your family as we head into the festive season. And to connect with you, Jules,
is julietenner.love, and you, Bridge?
bridgetwood.life. Remember to nourish the woman, to rock the family.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
Thank you so much for listening. We literally couldn't do this without you. Please share this podcast with anyone you think it would be medicine for.
If you desire to integrate your learnings practically and supportively into your life, then head on over to bridgetwood.life or julietenner.love to go deeper.
And if you feel like giving back a little to this free content, please rate us on iTunes or Facebook, all of which helps the podcast reach more mamas who need this type of tonic for the soul.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.